clues me in as to maybe he might be leaving the book, not Archie Comics, but maybe the main book after 250. Passing it on to other people. So I'm not totally sure, but that's just my opinion. But by reading that first email, it tells me that Ian, he understands, basically, whether we like him or not, he understands that there's going to be a lot of people that don't like him and what he's doing right now, and he understands he can't please those people. But he also understands that there are those that do like what he's doing and look forward and basically he's saying that. But again, he's basically saying that he knows there are some people that are behind him that are looking with a positive anticipation. So basically, judge how you will with this, and I will provide a link to the email, to this DeviantArt submission, if you will. But say what you will. But what I can tell from there is Ian Flynn does understand that you have one side that's very huge and very negative and very not supporting of him and doesn't like what he's doing, but he also understands he has another side, a huge side, that is anticipating what he does next. So this is pretty good. This is a pretty good answer, a pretty good response he gave to Game Boy Sage. So I will give Ian credit. He is trying to at least give us an understanding that he's trying to do his best. Now, from what I could tell when I read this, he basically says, from what I could read here, like at the beginning, he's afraid he can't adequately answer most of the questions. Basically, what he's saying is that obviously the questions that Game Boy Sage was asking were about certain things that we were all concerned about within the story, and basically wanted to have the answers as to what was going to happen. And from what I could tell, Ian Flynn basically is saying, look, as much as I would love to give you guys those answers, as much as I would like to come out and say, this is what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen, here's how that's going to happen, here's how this is going to happen, he can't do it because he's afraid that would spoil everything, and he doesn't want to spoil the book or what's to come. And that's perfectly understandable. It's perfectly understandable, folks, because who's to say we, as fans, if we were in Ian's position, who's to say we, myself, Game Boy Sage, Ezekiel 300, Miko, Laser X5, Jonathan 83X, Mystic Core, Cloud Davis, Digimon 11, Red Menace, Toby Barrett, who's to say any of us, Tross, Elcencio, who's to say none of us would be doing the same thing that Ian's doing right now? Who's to say we wouldn't do something similar? I mean, let's put ourselves, as much as, some people may hate to hear this, let's put ourselves in Ian Flynn's shoes. And let's say people wanted us to do something different, wanted to shake the book up a little bit. Who's to say, if we were to shake up the book like Ian has done, that we wouldn't get the same responses from people? We probably would. So we can't really, as much as we don't like what he's doing right now, we can't really judge him just yet. Game Boy Sage has basically come out and said, and I'll read this in the response, has come out and said, look, I'm going to give him to 234, and that's going to be my judging point, whether something bad happens there or not. Now, the second email that Ian Flynn sent to Game Boy Sage, the second email goes like this. GB, or Game Boy Sage, and I quote, GB, this is the second email, it says, GB, I try to respond when I can, where I can. To be honest, for any further debate, I'd ask you to take it up on the Bumble King forums, so that it's fair to everyone else. But I remember growing with the fandom, how supportive some of them were when I went after this job, and I'd like to and I like to interact/geek out when I can. That and most comic writers don't do what I do. In other words, he's saying most comic book writers won't take time out of their busy schedule to communicate via email. Or through message boards, various message boards, if you will, with the fans. Continuing on, this is the second part of the second email. I quote, "I'm starting to see where you're coming from with the other M thing now. But honestly, it's more similarity than conscious choice. Sally wasn't so much shot in the head as she was shot in her everything." In other words, what he's saying is that torrent shot we had at the end of towards the end of 225 basically blew her away. In other words, there was like nothing left. It's like, okay, you've seen those horror movies, you've seen those very violent war movies and everything. Put it to like, look at it that way. Like, let's say there's been some violent scenes in Saving Private Ryan, like somebody getting their head blown off, or even in Glory, in the movie Glory, something like that. That's what he's talking about. Okay, now again, repeating, he says, Sally wasn't so much shot in the head as she was shot in her everything. That, and get this, you guys are going to love this one, and originally, she wasn't going to be shot at all. She was supposed to be roboticized in 225. That's right, what happened to her in 230 was supposed to happen in the anniversary issue. Then it was decided we would do Genesis, so we came up with an alternate cliffhanger. That's right. So in other words, with an alternate cliffhanger. So in other words, what Ian is saying there in this second part of the second email is that Sally's roboticization was supposed to take place at the end of the anniversary issue. But when it was decided to do something for Genesis, basically for the 20th anniversary, what they did was say, okay, let's make an alternate ending, and let's do Genesis, tie it in somehow with the current storyline, and then roboticize her. That's basically what I'm hearing. Basically, that's what I'm hearing. Or I'm reading, basically. Now, he continues on in the third part of this second email. He continues on. In Bunny's case, with Other M, the idea was to approach the character was, okay, the third part of this second email is, in Bunny's case, with Other M, the idea was to approach the character in a wholly different way. Archie Bunny is powerful, bombastic, and capable of great destruction. Other M Bunny was soft-spoken, a healer, and nearly powerless. In this instance, Bunny being returned to normal is a challenge for her to see how she handles being depowered so abruptly. As for how that happened, keep a few things in mind. 1. Nagas's magic affects inorganic material. Hold on to that. It says affects inorganic material, and then he references issue 53 of the comic. 2. Nagas has a Chaos Emerald. There's a hint right there. There's a hint right there in my thoughts of what's going to happen. And 3. Nagas wasn't entirely sure how he did that to begin with. And then he kind of puts in quotation marks, ha ha. So in other words, that gives you another hint. So right there, he just gave Game Boy Sage kind of like hints and clues as to how Sally will be restored. And it sounds like to me that one of the beings inside Nagas that's fighting for control is a being that probably is a good being. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Now, continuing on with the third part, or actually not the third, but the fourth and fifth part of the second email, the fourth and fifth part, and I quote, I understand your concerns, and while this is going to sound sick, this is from Ian, I like that. I want you to be concerned. I want you to wonder how our heroes will rally after all this. I'm actively trying to remove the security blanket of, oh, everyone will be fine in the end. Think of it this way. In Star Wars Episode 6, The Empire Strikes Back, things end on a horrible note. Han Solo is captured, being taken to a crime lord. Luke's lost a hand, and his faith has been shaken, if not momentarily shattered. And the rebellion got stomped on Hoth. The whole movie is pretty much the good guys lose. But that wasn't the end of the story. You'll see. Okay, so basically, what it sounds like Ian is saying there, in these final parts of the second email, is basically he wants the fans, like Game Boy Sage, to be concerned for what's going to happen next. He wants them to question and wonder what's going to happen, how the heroes will rally. But then here's the thing. He says he's actively trying to remove the blanket, the wet blanket, if you will, or the security blanket. Like Linus is always carrying his blanket around, right? Linus of the Peanuts, always carrying his blanket around because he can't part with it. Basically, this is their way of removing the security blanket, or the Linus blanket, if you will, from the fans. Because basically he's saying the fans that are always carrying the security blanket, that Linus blanket of saying everything's going to be fine, I want to remove that. I want to take that away from them so they could start thinking that not everything's going to be okay. All right. And then the reference to Star Wars Episode 6, you might have a question. You might worry with that kind of a reference. But you know what? I've seen all 6 Star Wars. And I think I kind of understand where he's coming from. Now, Game Boy Sage does talk about this at the end of their little description here. And they do kind of hope that, Ian Flynn doesn't go in the direction of having, let's say, just like Darth Vader going back to being Anakin Skywalker at the end of Episode 7 and rescuing his son, if you will. I think he misquoted that because that was Episode 6. That's Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. You know what I'm saying? Empire Strikes Back is Episode 5, actually. But anyway, in Return of the Jedi, we all know that that Darth Vader went back to being Anakin Skywalker as he was dying, and because he had basically returned back to the side of the Jedis. Now, this is what Game Boy Sage is kind of concerned about, and I'm sure anybody else reading this would be concerned the same way. That what they'd be concerned about is Ian Flynn going in that same direction of having Sally not only get restored, but probably, folks, losing her life in the end. Well, we can only hope, we can only wonder about that. Now, this is Game Boy Sage's response, or basically the little text they put in the description box. And again, I'll put a link to this submission. Excuse me for a second, I'll be right back. I gotta check something. Okay, folks, I just had to let my cat back in the garage. But basically, this is Game Boy Sage kind of responding to those emails in the description box. And again, I'll post a link at the end. But this is Game Boy Sage's response, and I quote, "So after posting a few arts expressing my displeasure with what Ian Flynn has been doing with the comic lately, a few people made the point that I should try flat out contacting him myself instead of just flaring around here with the arts." So basically, like I said at the beginning, some people suggested he email and contact Ian Flynn directly. I decided to do, now continuing on, and I quote, this is Game Boy Sage's thoughts and responses. And I quote, "I decided to do just that and sent him an email essentially telling him everything about my fears and concerns about what he's doing to the comic, as well as what